Good afternoon. Welcome to the Author's Hour. My name is Fred Zerman, and I represent the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We are an organization that aims to encourage writers and writing on the institution grounds and beyond by supporting and also supplementing the activities of the institution's Writers Center. We host some activities every week. One of them is this, the Author's Hour. So every Thursday during this season at 12:15, we have at least two Chautauqua authors reading from their books. On Sundays at 5 o'clock, we host an open mic up on the second floor of this building in the prose room. If you're 18 years old or older, and I believe you are, you may attend either as a reader or a listener. On Tuesdays, you can get what you don't get at open mics. Open mic is basically a reading, but you don't get critical feedback. If you have a piece of writing that you'd like to get some actual critiquing of, at 1:15 on Tuesdays after the poetry brown bag, up in, appropriately enough, the poetry room, bring one page of writing, prose or poetry, and just to be safe, 10 copies, just in case we get up to 10 people. We're usually more at like 6 or 7. And a published writer, I think this coming Tuesday is going to be me. Other Tuesdays, it's Shahid Aziz, who's an accomplished poet, will lead a critique. Still supportive. It's not a bashing session, but you will get some suggestions for improvement. At halftime, I'll talk about some of the special events that the Friends sponsors. But let's get on to our first author, Dr. Shahid Aziz, who has authored Courageous Conversations on Dying, the Gift of Palliative Care. During the past 20 years, he's spoken to over 1,000 families about end-of-life decisions. He's board certified in pediatrics, medical management, and hospice and palliative medicine. After training in pediatrics at University of Maryland, he has been on the clinical faculty of University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, along with multiple local hospitals in the the Baltimore metropolitan area. He chairs multiple ethics committees and works with palliative care teams at local hospitals and hospices, helping take care of both children and adults. He is actively involved in the education of the public and medical personnel. I will let Dr. Aziz fill you in on any other things you need to know about him and his work. Let's welcome Dr. Shahid Aziz.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming, first of all. And I know it's a lovely afternoon, but this is a lovely activity also. And I want to thank Fred and the institution for allowing me to do my work here and actually allowing me to read from a book that is a nonfiction book, which is not often that we do this. So I appreciate that. Other people I want to thank, of course, is the people who helped me write the book. I think just gave me the information, gave me the knowledge by the interactions with them, which is really you all that have interacted with me, my parents, my patients, their families, even the students. They have always taught me. And my editor, who's here presenting after me. Thank you for her input in making my English better and right, and putting the book in order. So anyway, so I'm a pediatrician. Why do I do this work, and how did I get here? So it's amazing how life sort of leads you to where I think you were meant to be, and had a lot of fun doing general pediatrics. Took care of a lot of well children, sick children, and in my life got to be chair of the ethics committee at one of the hospitals. And the 90% or more patients that were presented to us for resolution, the issues, they all had to do with end of life. So, I saw a lot of suffering, still do, and a lot of pain, a lot of angst for the patient and the family and the staff and the doctors and the nurses. So I got pulled to sort of look at that and see how we can make that better. Because and what ethics taught me was that all your actions have to be for the good of the patient. So how do we find that good? And I cannot know what is good for you unless I know what you feel is good for you. So that got into the conversations with the patients and the families, and I've done at least 1,000 or more so far. From there, I learned what I have in the book. And how this book is going to help you is to help you know the importance and how to have these conversations about yourself with your family, which is the best gift that you can give them. The title of the book says, Courageous Conversations, the Gift of Palliative Care. And I'm going to explain why it's a gift from palliative care to have these conversations and why these conversations are gifts to your family from you. So this process of having this conversation is called advanced care planning. So this process of advanced care planning allows patients to articulate their goals and drives the plan of care to determine what treatments to offer in order to achieve these goals. Thus, holding these difficult conversations is a gift. There's a palliative care team consisting of physicians, nurses, social workers, nurse practitioners, chaplains, and more offered to the patient, the family, and other healthcare providers, and all those who support that patient, with focus on all aspects of suffering, including physical, emotional, psychosocial, and spiritual. So that the conversations about death and dying and advanced care planning that clearly define one's important goals and wishes is a gift to one's family, probably one of the best gifts you can give to one's children and loved ones. The family can now be guided by these wishes if the capacity for decision-making is lost, and one or more members of the family must take decisions at this emotional time. It's like the biggest burden the families ever feel is making these tough decisions for their loved ones. So having the conversation is going to help them. Not peace. But to have these conversations, first you have to accept death. That death is part of life, and it is coming, it is going to happen. The conversation is going to help you live a good life at the end of life and have a good ending as good as possible. So I'd like to share a story with you on accepting death. It's a personal story of my father. I was 20 years away from becoming a palliative care physician when I began to have end-of-life discussions with my father. Looking back now, I'm not sure that I was even aware of what I was doing at that time. But I do know that it was this experience with my father that actually taught me how to think about goals of living at the end of life. So actually in my talks, and you'll see in the book, there's a form that talks about end-of-life living goals. He called me, his son from the doctor from Pakistan, to say that he was having pain in his left arm when he would go on his 2 to 3 mile daily walk. He loved walking out to dinner long and fast, and when I was a teenager, I would often walk with him, and it was hard for me to keep up with him. The pain ended up being an early sign of angina, which sublingual medication helped him to cope with fairly well. He was still able to walk for miles, drive his car, and live alone. A few years later, he called again. Now his angina was getting worse. He said his pain was now occurring when he was walking only a mile or less, and seemed to be getting stronger. Fearing an inevitable heart attack, as probably all of you know, it's a sign of impending heart, I advised him that his heart vessels were probably narrowing, but that this was fixable. I urged him to come to the United States so this could be taken care of. Otherwise, he was risking a heart attack any day. So, we put stents in, we do cabbage, all that. So he understood, but made excuses. He said, it was difficult to travel. He was grateful and very happy to have lived such a wonderful life, to have seen all his children grow up, get married, have grandchildren. He was thankful to God and missed his wife, my mother, who died over 10 years earlier. No, he said, I'm ready to go. I miss your mother. I wish to live as long as possible, but on my own, and I do not want to be dependent on anyone else. I pray to God for that every day. When my time comes, I hope he takes me quickly without dependence on others. That is my wish. Today, when we talk to a patient, he says this, we say this is his advanced plan, advanced care plan. Okay, his goals of care conversation, this is what he wants. Now, my father was telling me that I didn't have a name for it, what he was saying, but I understood what he was saying. So a few weeks later, my wife and I were lying in bed reading at night when I suddenly smelled a strong, sweet rose aroma. So, are you wearing perfume? I asked my wife. She said, no. So a few moments later, I again smelled the sweet odor. And I again asked her if she was sure that she was not wearing perfume. I had different thoughts. She denied it again. And that little annoyed at my repetitious questioning. That night I dreamed I was at a hillside resort. And this wonderful man, my father, we call him Abbajan, as we used to call him, whom I loved so much, met me in a place of worship looking marvelously healthy and at peace. He gave me the longest embrace, and I can never remember. The next morning, I told my wife that I think my dad, or perhaps both my parents, had come to visit me and that I had better call home. Something's up with Abbajan, I said. But in my hurry, I was the medical director at the time, a lot of work, going to work. I did not get to call. Sure enough, later in the day, my brother called to tell me that my father had died suddenly of a heart attack. In our culture, we put fresh rose petals around the dead person, and there is always a strong, sweet smell, just like I smelled the night before in bed. This is 10,000 miles away. If I ever had a doubt about whether we had souls, it was erased forever. I think about this event often and marvel at my father's courage, understanding, faith, and acceptance. He knew that his time had come and he wanted to leave this world living and dying the way he wanted. He wanted to leave it without being dependent on others for care and walking on his own, which he still did at the age of 84. I believe my father was able to achieve this by accepting death when its time had come. It can be helpful for those of us who are left behind think of the departed as having passed on to the next chapter in their lives. As I struggled with what had to be one of the saddest times in my life apart from the death of my mom, my wife Jean gave me a framed poem to help me cope and accept the loss of my father. This poem, written by Mary Elizabeth Fry, hangs in my room. Most of you probably know it. It reads, don't stand at my grave and weep. I'm not there, I do not sleep. I'm 1,000 winds that blow. I'm the diamond glints in snow. I'm the sunlight on ripened grain. I'm the gentle autumn rain. When you waken in the morning's hush, I'm the swifter uplifting rush of quiet birds in circle flight. I'm the soft star that shines at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry, I'm not there, I did not die. Perhaps as we see the wonders of everyday life, those of us who are physicians and healers can learn to accept that death will eventually find us all. Once we embrace this acceptance within ourselves, we can be helpful to others who need us dearly in their time of pain and sorrow. It goes for everybody. Now, with my work, as you can see, the people always say, well, when we have terminated, because I take care of, I'm down pediatric hospice, I'm director of pediatric hospice near Washington, D.C., Montgomery Hospice. And I direct the pediatric portion, but I do adult as well. And you see people always say, well, you cannot take the hope away from the patients, right? So you've got to give them hope. And you cannot say things are not going to get better or whatever. So here I have a small chapter called Realistic Hope. One detail that separates the palliative care physicians from other specialties in medicine is that we are charged with giving our patients hope that is realistic without being defeatist. Hope changes as time and disease march on. So the hope in patients and parents starts to change from what they hoped on day one to what they're hoping now. What begins as a hope for a mistaken diagnosis becomes the hope for a miracle from a second opinion, sometimes third and so on. Then it becomes hope for a cure. Then hope for another remission. And then hope for a little more time, followed by hope for less pain, and finally the hope to end suffering. Hope for another year, month, week, day, or even an hour of good time spent together is hope that is worthwhile. I found this beautifully illustrated by a father of one of my patients. His 16-year-old daughter was actively dying of brain cancer and was in a comatose state. During my home visit, he confided in me that he hoped for just one more moment of looking in her eyes, like he had done the day before. So this father said, "You know, Doc, yesterday she opened her eyes, so I just lay in bed with her and gazed into her eyes for a good 45 minutes. That was the best day. Now I am just hoping for one more moment like that." So that's how sort of the hope goes. And our work is to help them, support them in that process to get them through these difficult times. So these conversations that we have, so my work has tried to come up with sort of a simple, easy way of having this conversation. Because somebody said, "Oh, you know, there's all these treatments. Do we have to list every treatment in our advanced directive?" And I said, no. So the focus is on the quality of growth. If you can focus on and tell us what quality of life you want to live, we can figure out what treatments to give or not to give. So we do that by the means of what we call 3 questions. We owe it to ourselves and our families to have our end-of-life conversation with our loved ones. And as physicians, we owe it to our patients to address their end-of-life living goals by means of advanced care planning in a timely fashion, while they still have decision-making capacity. But when is a good time to do this? The time to dialogue is now. So now you have capacity, this is the time to do it. While your patients have their wits about them, whether they have serious illness or not. As physicians, it's our responsibility, as parents, it's your responsibility to establish clear goals of care that would guide your plan of care for you. So the goal is to maintain the patient at the minimum acceptable level of functioning or better, and finding out what that patient envisions their life to be can be achieved by asking the 3 questions. So we ask these 3 questions on what is your acceptable minimum level of awareness or mental functioning, minimum level of physical functioning, where you would say, okay, as long as I'm able to do this, life is good for me. It's meaningful. And if your life is being prolonged by any artificial means, it's good. You're doing good for the patient. Remember, my actions are good for the patient, but this is good for the patient. Once the patient goes below that level, then we know we don't have to artificially prolong their life, whether it's medicines or machines. Okay? So that's generally in a nutshell, is how you would do that. But I want to. So while you have capacity, you can of course talk to people. But what about if you don't have capacity, or you never had these discussions? When I'm called to consult and talk with the families, I must say close to 80, 90%. I've never had any conversation about end of life. I've never made any comments as to what may be important to them or not. So how do you help the family let go, and how do you have the family make the decision that's good for the patient? So I have one story for you on that. It's called "I Do Not Want to Lie in a Bed of Affliction." This is a true story which illustrates the fact that just a simple comment in conversation can be helpful with difficult decisions later in life, even when there is no written advance directive or living will. Mary was 93 years old, had mild dementia. She could let you know how she was feeling, but could not make much sense otherwise, and could not make her own decisions. She had mild contractures of her legs and lay in bed most of the time, but could get up with help. Mary was admitted with a painful left foot, gangrene of her toes, and sepsis. You understand sepsis is infection throughout the body. Her family was asked for a consent, and her family members were asked, and the doctors recommended amputation of the left leg before the knee and get rid of the gangrene. Without that, they said she wouldn't survive. That actually is the treatment for gangrene. You have to just sort of get rid of it. So her family was asked for a consent for the surgery. And her family members then met with the palliative care team, including myself, to discuss options and see what would be the right choice. There were no advance directives. In further talking with Mary's family about the kind of life they thought she would have wanted to live, one of the sons remembered her saying, "I never want to lie in a bed of affliction." So when they told me that, I said, "My gosh, that's beautiful. Can I use it in my book if I write a book?" So I hadn't written the book at the time. So anyway, so they said, "Of course you can." So this is with their permission. So the family was asked to keep this comment of hers in mind going forward and make decisions that would honor her wish of not lying in a bed of affliction. So that's the only conversation she had, essentially. So with the help of this comment and the guidance of the palliative care team, they were able to decide not to have the surgery, because although that would give her a longer life, she would definitely be lying in the bed of affliction she'd want. Plus, we would be giving her a lot of pain, would have to manage that. And it's not going to improve her dementia. She will still be going downhill. So they opted to enroll her in hospice instead and take her home to be with the family for as long as God wished her to be here. The family was at peace with their decision since they felt it followed Mary's voiced wishes. I'm just trying to impress upon you as to how important even this little, talk is with your loved ones, and to say as to what you feel. So the key factor again is, and the beauty is having these talks. So I hope I am making my point. That's what you need to do. All right, I see Fred is standing. That means I need to get the heck out of here. Again, thank you for coming. I'm here, and I was telling other folks, I'm here throughout the season, and I'm available now, later, anytime. You have my information. If you want to have a conversation about anything, I'm here for you. Okay, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Just a reminder that nonfiction does not mean non-emotional. Just a few announcements, and then we'll get on to our second author. As you may have noticed, time has passed, and the season is heading into its final, 2 weeks and a few days. So most of our major activities at the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center are done. The major annual. The literary arts contest, the writing contest, the winners have been decided, and they will be announced at 2:30 this Sunday in the Hall of Philosophy, also on Zoom. So please, if you can attend in person, that would be great. If not, by computer, and eventually even on YouTube. So anytime you want to go back and see who won. Did want to remind everyone that both our authors will be available for selling and signing their books and for informal conversation about anything that occurred to you while they were reading. Maureen Ryan Griffin is our second author, a special studies instructor here at Chautauqua. She has taught the art and craft of writing for over 30 years through a wide variety of venues. An award-winning poetry and nonfiction writer, she's published in Calyx, Chelsea, Cincinnati Poetry Review, the Texas Review, and the Chautauqua Daily, among others. Her books include Spinning Words into Gold, a hands-on guide to the craft of writing, How Do I Say Goodbye, a companion in grieving, healing, and gratitude, and her latest collection of poetry, 10,000 Cicadas, Can't Be Wrong. Maureen offers individual coaching as well as writing classes through her business Wordplay. And at Wordplay Now.
Yeah, Wordplay Now.
That includes the now.
No time like the present, right?
Right. Maureen Ryan Griffin.
Thank you to all of you for being here on this beautiful day. This building and this porch are so special to me, as I know they are to a number of you. Can you all hear me okay? I started coming here to take writing classes when my children were very small. I found out when I was living in North Carolina about the Writers Center, and I thought, Mom in Erie, 2 little children, So I was a walk-in day student for a long time, and I'm very grateful for my time at Chautauqua. And I want to thank Fred and Robin and all the staff who make this happen. And I want to thank Shahid for his beautiful reading of his work. It was such a privilege to get to work with him on courageous conversations and to have that out in the world. And I'm going to give you a little kind of around the world tour of my books. As I do my reading, they all got, well, the poetry got written because I love to write poetry, and the other ones got written because of various intentions or circumstances. And I want to start with How Do I Say Goodbye and Praying You Goodbye, because there's such a connection to Fred. And what happened is I lost my mother, as probably many of us here have lost our mothers. I had a very complicated relationship with her, but I loved her very deeply, and I created a ritual to say goodbye to her, which was going through Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages and adding a few more of my own. And then a Presbyterian minister friend of mine who I'd mentioned it to, she lost her dad, and she said, will you write it down? And now I want to share it with people. Will you make it into a book? And it just happened like that. I never really intended to do it, but I love having it. And one of the things that I absolutely love about all of the books I've written is that they have a lot of words by other people in them, other writers who have spoken to me. This week I've been teaching a class called The Nurturing Nature of Words in the Natural World, and I've been thinking all week about how much other people's words have nurtured me. And I was looking at the quotes I put in How Do I Say Goodbye, starting with David Grayson's, looking back, I have this to regret, that too often when I loved, I did not say so. And I was so happy that I knew that quote a long time ahead of time, and it could be a cautionary tale instead of a regret. So I could tell my mom how many times many times how much I did love her. And then I just have to share with you a quote by Norman Cousins, because I have a little section on forgiveness in here. And he said about forgiveness, life is an adventure in forgiveness, which actually makes me laugh, because I never thought about forgiveness as an adventure. I thought about it as something that was very, very difficult. And I was one of those people, I'm just going to be really truthful with you, who blamed my mother for everything in my life that wasn't the way I wanted it to be. I won't ask you to lift your hand if you think you might have been one of those people too. But that was the case for me, and I was so thankful that before I lost her, I got over that, and writing helped me to get there. But I thought that what I would read to you, I have some little writings in the back to inspire people, and I know it said in my little description I was going to do a little bit of memoir. So this is a little memory that I got to preserve by writing it down. It's called Eyes in the Back of Her Head Stew. And I hope it encourages you to think about the best memories you have of people you love, and to write them down. So, in one of my most treasured memories, my mother stands with her back to me, cooking supper. I am 3 years old and have propelled myself into the kitchen on my wooden riding horse. Climbing off, I stare at the painted circus animals chasing each other around the colorful metal wheels. What's this, I ask, pointing, knowing very well what it is. My mother turns to look. Zebra. I let her turn away again before asking, what's this? Elephant, then lion, then bear. I keep going around and around the wheel, sometimes skipping animals just to see if she's really paying attention. She keeps turning and answering until the moment I ask yet again, what's this? And she answers correctly without looking around. I am utterly amazed. How did you do that? I have eyes in the back of my head. You do not, I said. Show me. She laughed. I keep on pressing for an answer. But how did you know you knew without looking? It's because I'm a mother, she says. Someday you'll be a mother and you'll be able to do it too. Perhaps I remember this incident so vividly because it was the first time I encountered the idea that I would actually grow up, that I could someday be a mother too. It seemed impossible. And yet there was my mother, so sure of it, she could say so in the midst of making stew. And I'm going to read a little bit from my poetry collection, 10,000 Cicadas, Can't Be Wrong. And I'm going to share a little story with you about a synchronicity that happened with me. I love his beautiful story about the smell of the roses and his dream. And the night my mom died, I had a dream where there were butterflies everywhere. So I had that beautiful experience of getting what I think was a message from her. But one of the things that I always am looking for in life are these little moments of grace or synchronicity where things line up a certain way. And right now, my husband is going through a number of different medical challenges, and one of them is cognitive decline. And we decided that we really needed to get our act together and have those courageous conversations. And we got our wills done and we got our powers of attorney done. So a week before last Sunday, before I drove up here, I had to decide how I wanted, what I wanted to have done with my body. And I've always struggled with that, like I didn't really want to be embalmed, and I didn't like the idea of being, thank you, cremated. I was like, incinerated, that's not the right word, though. Cremated, that's it. And the lawyer had given us these advanced copies and said, I know we're signing these on Tuesday. You have to let me know by Monday morning what you want done. And I thought, oh my gosh, like the rubber is meeting the road here. And then I thought, well, if I really don't like either of those, let me just Google what's best for the planet, because the planet needs all the help it can get right now. And I decided, I looked at all these different options. I think 7 of them I found. It was interesting. And one of them was a green burial. And I had never heard of a green burial. It turns out there's green burial an hour away from where I live, and they bury you, no embalming, your casket will decompose, and you're only 3 feet down, and you're in this beautiful forest preserve. And my whole body just went, oh, that works for me, So I get here very late Saturday. First big thing I do is I go to Todd Davis's reading on Sunday. He's the poet of the week. If any of you were lucky enough to work with him, just an amazing poet. And he mentions that the best thing people could do for the earth if they wanted to help it out was have a green burial. And this was 1 week exactly since I had made my mind up. I was like, wow, that is an amazing thing. Well, I'm leafing through trying to figure out what I would like to share with you, what you might enjoy. And also I knew I was reading the Shahid, and I found this poem called Cover Me with Autumn that I wrote over 25 years ago. And I don't know if any of you have written enough things that you forget what you've written and you come across and you're like, oh, that. It's a nice thing. So I'm going to read this to you, because when I got to it, I got this jolt, and you'll see why, I think. Cover Me with Autumn. And you're allowed to laugh with me or even at me at the crazy things I've done that I talk about in this poem. That's what I hate to admit them, but Cover Me with Autumn. When I die, make for me a bed of nut brown needles, pine, fragrant as my mother's blind dried sheet. Cover me with a patchwork of autumn. Fill my casket with leaves. Rest me in their brilliance. Tell those who come about the time some stranger found me stooping on her sidewalk, my face buried in huge handfuls of sugar maple leaves. How I flushed and blurted out, "You caught me." Tell about the birthday I was astonished by the sight of chestnut, russet, crimson, burnished gold, heaped up, shaken together, spilling over my office desktop. A leafy gift 6 inches deep from a friend who understood. Reveal it was I, wading riotous through all those neatly raked piles at the curb in the dark of night, saving them from the city leaf truck. I want them all. Red maple, sugar maple, sweet gum, sourwood, tulip, red oak, water oak, pin oak, ginkgo, cherry, sassafras. I can't list them all. Surprise me. Thank you. It was so amazing to realize that I knew what I wanted back then. I had just forgotten or didn't know it was available. So that was very special. We love being readers, don't we? And all that comes from that beautiful gift. So this is my writing book, Spinning Words into Gold, which actually just got reprinted, and it's on beautiful paper. And I was so happy that it came back out, because I wrote it quite a while ago. And I got the idea for it. It just came to me as I was driving to a writers' conference one day, and I was working on some stuff for my mom, and I thought, and I can't work on that book until I'm finished with everything I need to do with all of that. And literally 2 days after I had finished off everything, my publisher in Charlotte, who published my poetry books, called me up and said, I want you to write a writing book and I'm going to publish it. And I was astounded, like, who gets a gift like that? It was just amazing to me. And then I realized I didn't know how to write an instruction manual. That's another story. I won't go into that. But anyway, what I envisioned was a book that was a conversation between writers and readers and people who were looking to write, and filled with like the readers you had in school. Did y'all have readers with stories in them and poems in them? So I wanted a book like that. And I have everybody from well, not everybody, of course, but I have Ray Bradbury and Mary Oliver. And here, Ray Bradbury wrote me back the most lovely acceptance note ever, giving me permission to use a little piece of his. And he when I sent him the proof, he sent me onward, it said, which I thought was so lovely, to people who had never been published before. And I used Rudyard Kipling's Very Curious Elephant Child, if any of you know his Just So stories, and I have all the questions in there. But I wanted to read you, actually, because how many of you in here are writers? I think many of you are writers. So I have a lot of tools in here, and I thought that it would be fun, and I actually have a little gift for some of you who want my magic ingredients tool, which Marie can attest to, since she's used it this week. Thanks for being here, Marie. And one of the, because I love finding ways to help people enter writing with ease and grace, so it can be enjoyable, and so it's not something that you avoid even though you really want to do it. I know a lot of people end up in that particular place. And I want to read you a little bit about this particular tool I call it the envisioning, where you begin with a collage. And then I'll read you a short poem I wrote after September 11th. Collaging can give writers settings, characters, themes, and more. On her website, SuMonkKid.com, in a journal entry called Measure and Madness, A Way of Writing, SuMonkKid told of creating a collage of images, including a pink house, a trio of African-American women, and a wailing wall, before beginning work on her novel, The Secret Life of Bees. How many of you are familiar with The Secret Life of Bees? That astounded me, that those things came from a collage and that weren't planned. At the time, she had no idea how or even whether these things would turn up in the novel, and all of you know that they did. So in March of 2002, about how many months is that after September 11th? Math is not my strong suit. Not too long after, I collaged images of the New York skyline at sunset, with the Twin Towers high and proud in the center, 3 honeybees, a grinning young girl with her arms outstretched, 3 toddlers in a box filled with styrofoam packing peanuts, and a recipe from Armstrong Floors, mud pies au lait du chocolat, which included a bucket of mud and a little girl. What came out was a poem for my daughter. And she was a sophomore in high school at the time, and as you can imagine, it really shook her world. I wanted to give you a purple cloud world where honeybees never sting, an easy mud pie world where flowers pick themselves and packages full of blessed surprises mail themselves to you every day. But all I have is this world, this dangerous world with its dark arrivals. Yet just tonight, the sky was dusked with lavender, and I heard the sun promising its return. So I have to confess, I set a timer, but I forgot to start it. How much time do I have? 3 3 minutes, okay. So I'm gonna end with a poem from 10,000 Cicadas, and this is for any of you. I wrote this for one student, and it's ended up being a really nice thing for me as well and other people. So maybe for some of you, this will give you a little bit of hope. Why you can go back to a story you abandoned years ago and finally finish it. Because the field that's been fallow yields a better crop. Because seeds have germination periods. Because some cicadas need 17 years. Because we need darkness to see the light, and so do our stories. Because we have some living to do first to become who we needed to be to write our story. Because we grow into the stories that are ours to tell. Because the thing we need to include to make our story what it needs to be hadn't happened yet. Because we needed to practice. Because our stories are patient, our stories are kind, our stories keep no record of wrongs, nor count the number of times we have abandoned them. Because our stories seek only to serve us and the people who need them. Because some births are harder and more painful than others. Because labor is called labor for a reason, because we say yes to a labor of love, to birthing a story when we are ready and not before. Because we can come to see that a story is often too polite to say, ready or not, here I come, but will come if you call that it is time for supper, because a story loves to be supped. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen, for that round the world tour. The first time I scheduled Shahid and Maureen together was just happenstance. Scheduling happened to work that way, but I think happenstance led us to a wonderful, wonderful combination. Let's hear it again for them, please. Just a few literary arts reminders. You may have seen some signs. There's no prose brown bag tomorrow because there was no prose class this week. However, we do have Sandra Cisneros speaking in the Hall of Philosophy today at 3:30. I was also do a cancellation that we normally would have a CLSE speaker. No offense to the CLSE speaker, but I think this year we've had some substitutes that have been a step up, at least in terms of reputation from the original. We had Brian Stokes Mitchell earlier this year as a sub at a concert. Okay. I do urge you to join the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. If you go to the institution website, chq.org, and then add a / and an FCWC, you can see a membership form and also a description of all our various activities. Next week at the office hour, we have somebody named Kiki Minor reading from a travel memoir called A Minor Odyssey, and also Joan Polishuk, who's an artist and a poet, presenting her Words on Paper books 1 and 2. I also wanted to remind you of Sandra Cisneros. I think it's tomorrow at 4. There's a workshop of the opera they're developing of The House on Mango Street, so that promises to be exciting. Please join us next week, and thank you for joining us today. Take care.
Thank you, Shahid.
And books are available. We're using 2 different tables, so to cut down on the wait time. Last time these 2 were together, we had a long